The smell of red dust hung thick in the hot Ouagadougou air as the convoy of armored vehicles rolled through the capital. At the center sat Ibrahim Traoré, the 36-year-old military captain turned interim president of Burkina Faso, dressed in his signature sand-colored fatigues, hands steepled under his chin. His eyes remained fixed on the horizon, but his mind was elsewhere, deep beneath the soil of the Tambao region, where satellites had just confirmed what the French geologists had refused to report. A vein of coltan so dense it defied international projections. "Captain, President," said Colonel Idris with hesitation, seated opposite him, "the Americans know. NSA birds changed position. They're watching. Let them watch," Traoré replied without looking up. "The soil belongs to us, not them, not Paris, not DC, but this." Idris leaned forward. "This is not gold. This is critical infrastructure. The West will see it as a threat." Traoré finally looked up. "Good." The convoy entered the secure gates of Camp Sankara, the former French military outpost now repurposed as the nerve center of Traoré's revolutionary government. The walls were lined with anti-drone netting, and camouflaged snipers watched from rooftops. Inside the underground command chamber, screens displayed live footage from Tambao, massive excavators operated by the Burkina military, hauling out glistening gray-black rock. Already, crates marked with sealed biometric locks were being loaded into underground vaults. In less than 48 hours, $28 million in raw rare earths had been mined, according to conservative estimates, but Traoré wasn't smiling. He stood at the head of the Situation Room table as generals, ministers, and engineers debated logistics. His mind was elsewhere already on the coming storm. "We need to cut satellite visibility by noon," he said sharply. "Scramble jammers, engage Skyblack protocols." Minister of Energy Kabor looked up from his tablet. "That will trigger NATO interest. They'll think we're hiding weapons." Traoré turned his head slowly. "We are hiding power. That's far more dangerous." There was a long silence. Suddenly, a red light blinked on the comms wall. "Incoming encrypted call, origin, Accra, Ghana." Traoré nodded. Kabor patched it through. The face of President Nana Mensah appeared, grim and grainy. "Ibrahim," he began. "You need to stop. France just invoked Article 5 of the Sahel Accord. They're claiming joint ownership of all mines registered prior to 2014. They're calling it colonial continuity." Traoré's eyes narrowed. "Colonial what? Continuity? Their lawyers argue it's legal. They want 80% of your find. Paris is already in talks with ECOWAS to label your actions as extraction piracy." Traoré clenched his jaw. "Then let them come. This land was bled dry for a century. Now that it bleeds wealth, they cry ownership." "Ibrahim, listen." Mensah hesitated. "There's more. A private security group, not Wagner, not CIA, something darker. Codename Black Prism. They've been deployed in Nigeria. Next target is you." Traoré stepped back from the screen. "Let them come." Meanwhile, across the Atlantic in a Pentagon sub-basement labeled Africa Intelligence Division Tier 7 Access, a group of suits and uniforms stared at satellite imagery flickering in real time. "I want a full dossier on this guy," said Director Elena Marx, head of the National Resource Conflict Office, who the hell mines $28 million in 2 days under French radar. "He's a soldier, young, charismatic, hardline Pan-Africanist, believes in Sankara's ideology," said analyst James Cheng, sliding a file across the table. "But smarter. He's not chasing socialism. He's chasing autonomy." Marx looked up. "We need to destabilize him fast, before China steps in." "They already have." Another analyst chimed in. "We intercepted a closed-channel communique from Shenzhen. A mining AI system called Longfang was activated in Tambao. It uses thermal prediction to maximize yield per cubic meter. It's been deployed once before in Inner Mongolia." Marx stared. "That system isn't supposed to be exported. How the hell did he get it? Through Mali with Russian crypto proxies." Marx stood up. "Okay, enough. Initiate Project Scorchfield. Start with economic sanctions. Freeze all IMF disbursements. Get ECOWAS to condemn him. And send in Prism. Quietly. No boots with flags." Back in Ouagadougou, in the heart of the presidential residence, Traoré met with his most trusted ally Zahra Diabate, an ex-journalist turned Minister of National Sovereignty. "They're coming for you," she said without preamble, tossing a file on the table. UN just classified the Tambao situation as an emerging destabilization trigger. French ambassador's plane leaves tonight. Traoré looked at the file but didn't open it. "Let them leave. We were never sovereign with them here." Zahra sat. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "There's more. I received a wire intercept. Your General Isaka Diallo, he's been in touch with MI6. Traoré's eyes darkened. "That snake." Zahra hesitated. "He's calling it a necessary correction. He says you're too aggressive, that you're provoking a full NATO shadow war. He's weak. He's powerful, and he has the loyalty of the northern regiments. If you don't act soon, then I will," Traoré said, standing. Tonight, that night, a quiet coup attempt unfolded behind the golden doors of Burkina Faso's military elite. Isaka Diallo, dressed in full uniform, strode into the northern command post expecting loyalty. Instead, he was met by Major Alassane, Traoré's covert loyalist, holding a pistol. "For betrayal of the Republic," Alassane said coldly. "You are relieved? You have no authority." Traoré stepped from the shadows. "I do." 3 shots rang out. A general fell, but even as the dust settled in the capital, a Black Prism team of 6 operatives crossed into Burkina Faso under forged medical credentials. Led by a man known only as Griffon, they carried no insignia, no digital traces. Only one objective: destabilize, extract, eliminate, and they were already en route to Tambao. Darkness fell like a shroud over the Tambao region as floodlights swept across the makeshift mining fortress. Since Traoré's extraction initiative had begun, the once forgotten zone had transformed into a militarized miracle. Giant mechanical rigs hummed under camouflage netting while soldiers patrolled with sand-dusted rifles, each one briefed that the world beyond their borders had turned hostile overnight. But even behind the buzz of machinery, whispers traveled like smoke, whispers of war, of betrayal, of ghosts who'd come for the ground under their boots. Griffin crouched low, silent as a shadow beneath the ridge overlooking the operation. His team, all former Black Ops mercenaries turned ghosts for hire, lay prone beside him, dressed in desert medical gear to fool drone signatures. His night scope flickered as he zoomed in on the operation's main tent, reinforced, climate controlled, and surrounded by motion sensors. According to Prism Intel, Traoré would arrive in less than 4 hours for an unscheduled inspection. Griffin tapped his mic. "Delta, Sigma, breach perimeter northeast at Mach 12. Keep thermal quiet. Tango with me, we intercept on the move. Copy," came the terse reply. Meanwhile, back at Camp Sankara, Zahra Diabate paced the war room, tension cutting through her like barbed wire. She had just received word that the IMF had frozen $400 million in developmental funds, and ECOWAS had issued a preliminary sanction resolution against Burkina Faso. A press conference had been hastily organized, with Western outlets broadcasting scenes of unregulated coltan mining and human rights concerns across screens in Geneva, London, and Washington. "They're painting us as pirates," she said aloud. Traoré stood silently by the map wall, eyeing the glowing red areas tagged as hostile narratives. He turned to his digital strategist, a wiry young hacker known only as Capakbo. "Time to change the story," Traoré ordered. "Leak the satellite data." Zahra snapped her head up. "What, you want to show them everything?" "No, just enough. Let the world see what's underneath Africa. Show them what we're standing on, the resources, the potential, the theft. But that'll expose our tech deals with China, Mali, and Iran." "Exactly," Traoré said calmly. "Let them all see. They need to know Africa doesn't beg anymore. It trades on its terms." Zahra hesitated, then nodded to Capakbo, who began typing furiously. Within minutes, major news outlets were pinged with raw satellite data, veins of rare earth minerals sprawling beneath Burkina Faso's northern crust like buried lightning. The numbers were staggering. The caption read simply, "They said Africa was poor, then we found this." Griffin's team had already slipped past the second perimeter. One of the sentries, a young recruit named Hamidou, never even saw the blow that took him down. The Prism agents worked quickly, dragging his unconscious body into a trench and slipping into the inner mining complex under the cover of a water truck. Inside the operations tent, Lieutenant Sanda was monitoring drone feeds when he caught something unusual, a flicker of heat in a dead zone. "Sir," he radioed, "thermal inconsistency near Sector 9C. Could be sand shift." Came the lazy reply from the monitoring bunker. "No, sir," Sander replied. "It's movement. I'm initiating yellow protocol." He never got the chance. Griffin and Tango burst into the tent seconds later. A suppressed round cracked the air and Sanda slumped over his console. Blood spread over the keyboard as the agents inserted a drive into the system hub. Downloading mineral maps, shipment logs, buyer signatures, Tango whispered. Griffin's eyes didn't leave the surveillance grid. No alarms, no panic, fast and quiet. But it wouldn't stay quiet. By the time Traoré's chopper descended onto the Tambao pad 2 hours later, the fire had already started. A fuel container in Sector 7A had exploded, deliberate sabotage disguised as an accident. 3 workers were injured, 1 killed. And worst of all, the biometric vault had been breached. Nearly won. $3 million in raw coltan had vanished. Where was security? Traoré barked as his boots hit the ground. Major Alassane looked grim. They used ECM masks, walked right past the perimeter, killed 2, took only marked crates, surgical, mercenaries, yes, but not local. These were trained Western or Eastern Bloc. Traoré turned to Zara, who had flown in with him. "How long until the story flips? How long until they say we're stealing from ourselves? It's already happening," she said, pulling up a holographic news feed, BBC, Al Jazeera. "Even African Union spokesmen are starting to shift tone. They bought them," he muttered. They bought the narrative. Back in Washington, Director Marks sat with her sleeves rolled up, sipping bitter black coffee as the Prism report came in. Partial success, Griffin's debrief said. Recovered shipment logs, maps, buyer chain. Left traceable fire signature, casualties minimal. "Good," she said, "now leak it. You want the world to know we raided them? No, I want them to think China did." Her assistant blinked, "But we didn't exactly," she said with a smile. The next morning, international media exploded with 2 headlines. The first came from a leaked Prism document, Beijing, linked operation suspected in Burkina Faso rare earth theft. The second was more brutal. Ibrahim Traoré's rogue extraction sparks mineral war in Africa. As protests broke out in Ouagadougou, funded quietly through NGO shells, Traoré convened an emergency meeting of his remaining loyalists. "They've triggered the trap," Zara said. "They want you to declare martial law so they can label you a despot." "What's the alternative?" Traoré asked. "Survive it," said Kpakpo, eyes gleaming, "and record everything." "You want us to film a war?" asked Alassane. "No," said Kpakpo, "I want us to weaponize the truth." At midnight, a drone with live encryption fed a global broadcast from deep inside the Tambao mine. Traoré stood before crates of untouched minerals, surrounded by engineers and soldiers. "This is Africa," he began, voice calm but thunderous. "This is what lies beneath our bloodied soil. This is what they never wanted you to see. While they called us poor, they mapped our veins. While they gave us loans, they stole futures. And now, when we claim what is ours, they sabotage, slander, and attack." He paused. "No more. From this moment, we open our books. The world will see what we see. If they call us rogue, then let us be rogue kings." But not all were cheering. In a quiet compound outside Accra, President Mensa was meeting with ECOWAS envoys and a French intelligence officer. "He's gone too far," the envoy said. "He's made it impossible to negotiate." Mensa nodded slowly. "It's time. To do what? Activate the Monroe contingency." The French officer stiffened. That was never meant to be used. And yet here we are. Back at Tambao, Zara received an anonymous audio file on a secure line. She played it once and her face drained of color. She stormed into Traoré's tent. "We've been betrayed again." "Who?" "Mensa, Ghana, France, ECOWAS. They're calling for joint stabilization forces." Traoré's eyes darkened. "So be it. he said quietly, then let them all come. He turned to his guards, seal the mine, and prepare the broadcast. Zara looked at him concerned. You're planning something dangerous. No, he said. Something necessary. He walked into the comms room and keyed in a code no one else had seen. As the world held its breath, Ibrahim Traoré sent a final message to every African leader, every global outlet, and every intelligence agency watching. This is the last time Africa will be mined without permission. Anyone who enters without a flag will leave without a name. The mine had become a fortress. Since the signal was sent, the final warning. Traoré's camp had braced for war, not metaphorical this time, but a real war, multi-front, hybrid and dirty. The Monroe contingency, long whispered about in colonial boardrooms and international think tanks, had now been activated. The term didn't exist on paper, but the effects were already rippling. Troop carriers moved silently across the Burkina Faso border, labeled as peacekeeping units. But with encrypted orders from a joint ECOWAS French intelligence desk, at the same time sabotage escalated. Transmission towers went dark, a vital railway line was blown up near Koya, and a cholera scare gripped the outskirts of Ouagadougou. A new whisper rose in markets and bus stops. Traoré is cursed. The gods want him gone. In the mining bunker, Zara Diabate stared at a decrypted French memo cape Akbo had pulled from an intercepted satellite drone. It contained a list 18 names. Traoré's was at the top. A kill order. We underestimated them, she said, voice barely above a whisper. No, Traoré replied, staring at a flickering terminal. We trusted too many. Suddenly, alarms howled. The compound's northern flank had been breached. A gunship came in low and fast, barely above the ridge, spitting fire into the outer guard towers. The ground trembled as shelling began, not full scale, not yet, but precise and humiliating. A warning. Infantry silhouettes moved through the smoke, wearing uniforms with no insignias. They aimed to be ghosts. Major Alassane barked orders from the control tower, pushing back with an elite unit of Burkina Faso's Red Vultures. Snipers took position, anti-air turrets were activated, and from the central comms building, Cape Akbo launched an electromagnetic pulse burst, frying every unauthorized drone within a 12-mile radius. By morning, 27 attackers were dead. 4 captured, but the message had been delivered. We're not going to survive this without help, Zara said, nursing a gash on her temple. Traoré said nothing. Then, slowly, he opened a sealed satphone case marked with a red crescent and an old symbol few in the room recognized. What is that? Alassane asked. A line, Traoré said, to the Brotherhood of the Sahel. Deep beneath the sands of Timbuktu, in an abandoned salt dome converted into a covert listening post, a call came through to Commander Ayoub al-Zairi. Ex-Mali intelligence, ex-warlord, now head of a secret coalition of anti-colonial militias, desert tribes, and rogue African nationalists. Ibrahim, he said, voice like iron dipped in fire. Traoré's reply was sharp. The Monroe contingency has begun. I need your shadows. You told us not to interfere. You told us diplomacy would work. I was wrong. A long silence. You understand the cost of calling us in, Ayoub said. I do, and once we start, there's no peace until the empire breaks. So be it. Within the hour, 200 bikes with mounted RPG tore across the Sahel. In Paris, the president of France was briefed by General Marceau. He's pulling in the desert tribes, Zairi's people. You know what that means. The president nodded, quagmire. But we can't pull back now. If Burkina Faso walks away from every Western deal and hands control to a rogue economic bloc, then Africa slips from our fingers for good. The president turned to his aide. Send the envoy quietly. Let's make him an offer. That night, Traoré sat in a dimly lit tent with Jean-Claude Valois, a diplomatic snake with polished shoes and tired eyes. The Frenchman spoke carefully, as if avoiding sudden movements would change the course of history. Ibrahim, I come not as your enemy but as your equal. You've never treated Africa as equal. Then let this be the first time. He placed a small drive on the table. A counter-proposal. You step down peacefully. Your country receives full IMF debt forgiveness, infrastructure aid, global recognition. You walk away a hero, not a martyr. Traoré smiled, and in exchange, Control of the mine shifts to a shared European-African Development Board. 60/40 split. France guarantees no military interference from here on. Traoré leaned back. You came here wearing perfume, Jean-Claude. That was your mistake. I beg your pardon. You should have come smelling of sweat and dust, like the rest of us, because only men who've bled for this land get to decide what happens next. He stood. The answer is no, and tell Paris next time, send a soldier, not a salesman. The rejection sent shockwaves across Europe. Markets dipped. Commodity futures exploded. Investors panicked. France sent a second wave not of diplomats, but of misinformation. Social media platforms flooded with AI-generated stories, footage of alleged child laborers in Tambao, fake interviews with ex-employees, claiming state torture, manipulated images of Traoré living in luxury while his people starved. Zara slammed her laptop shut. This is madness. We're fighting a digital war, a military siege, and an economic collapse at the same time. Traoré looked at her. Then we fight 3 wars. We don't have the weapons, no, he interrupted. We are the weapon. And then came the moment that no one expected. From Johannesburg, a transmission. South Africa's president publicly denounced the ECOWAS intervention, calling it neocolonial aggression disguised as peacekeeping. A coalition of southern African states followed suit. Zimbabwe, Namibia, Mozambique, and a shock statement from Algeria promised military observers to monitor external violations of Burkinabe sovereignty. The African Union was now fractured, and for the first time, Ibrahim Traoré stood on a stage not as a fringe revolutionary, but as the face of an emerging African front. In Tambao, he issued the now famous rally. If the world wants to know where Africa's strength comes from, tell them it does not come from begging. It comes from bleeding, and we have bled enough. But just when momentum began to shift, Griffin returned. The mercenary had not failed. His last mission had embedded a Trojan within the mining facility's AI logistics system. One command buried deep that would erase every record, overload every sensor, and collapse the inventory grid. That command was activated on the 3rd night after the rally. Silence fell over Tambao as the systems crashed, hard drives fried, inventory logs vaporized, drones spun out midair. The mine, for a moment, went dark. Chaos. In the darkness, sabotage teams struck again, this time, aiming not to steal, but to destroy. By dawn, over $8 million in processed minerals was lost. Zara screamed at the walls. This was never about the minerals, it was about the idea. They want the world to believe we're unstable, incapable, unworthy of what's ours. Kapakpo, shaking with fatigue, said only, then let's give them a new idea. He revealed a backup server hidden under layers of encryption. I mirrored everything, every trade, every proof of ownership, and I recorded every kill order, every Black Op transmission from ECOWAS France, the IMF. Zara stared at him. You mean evidence, leverage, blackmail, truth? Traoré looked between them. His face, dust, streaked and bloodied, was lit only by the fire of the generator backup. Then we go global, he said, tonight. A new broadcast was prepared, not just of the mine, but of everything. The whistleblower files, the maps, the audio of Valois, the intercepted kill orders, the fake child labor videos reverse, engineered to reveal French AI origins, and one final file, labeled Monroe Directive Confirmed. The world watched as Ibrahim Traoré dropped the curtain. In a war room in Brussels, a NATO analyst whispered to her commander, "If we don't move now, we lose control of half the continent." Her commander looked grim. "If we do move now, we trigger the next Vietnam." And just before the video feed ended, Traoré looked into the camera and said, "You said Africa was poor. Then I mined $28 million in 2 days, and I haven't even started yet." The sky above Tambao was crimson. Not from the sun, but from the burning wreckage of a downed drone swarm that had attempted one last strike against the mine. Anti-air batteries, reprogrammed by CAPE, ACPO's underground engineers, had created an electromagnetic curtain so dense that even high-orbit satellites began losing feed. For 72 hours after the leak, the world had been in chaos. Global news anchors scrambled to decode the files released by Traoré, Millions of viewers tuned in, jaws dropped, as voice recordings of European ministers casually discussing permissible destabilization echoed over footage of bloodied villagers and scorched farm fields. The Monroe Directive, long dismissed as a conspiracy theory, was now laid bare in full operational memos and execution flowcharts. Washington issued a vague statement. The French Parliament exploded in protest, demanding the resignation of 4 senior officials. 3 African leaders who had backed ECOWAS intervention now faced riots in their capitals. In Lagos, students marched with placards saying, "Traoré is Africa." But inside Burkina Faso, Traoré knew the clock was still ticking. In the underground war chamber beneath the mine, Zahra, Alassane, and Cape, Akpo argued fiercely. The question, what next? We've won the hearts, yes, Alassane said, but they will not stop. There will be sanctions, assassinations, coups. The empire never forgives humiliation. We can't survive forever as an isolated fortress, Zahra added. And the African Union is fractured. Half love us, half fear what we represent. Cape Akpo, sipping bitter tea, spoke softly. There is one way. We launch the AfriTech initiative, make the mine's technology open source, invite every willing African nation to adopt the blueprint. No one owns the mine, everyone shares it. Alassane slammed his fist. That's insanity. You want to make our greatest weapon public. Zahra leaned forward, realization dawning. No, he wants to make it unstealable. Cape Akpo nodded. If everyone owns the revolution, no one can kill it. Traoré looked at them all, eyes heavy. Do it. The next week saw a cascade of events unlike anything in modern African history. A summit was held in Niamey. Delegates from 17 nations arrived, some secretly, some in full defiance of Western threats. Sierra Leone, Chad, Malawi, Gabon, and even oil, rich Angola sent representatives. They signed the Tambao Accord, pledging to support an inter-African mining and development alliance based on full transparency, blockchain tracking, and public audit mechanisms. More shocking, within the month the first AfriCoin node went live, backed by rare earth minerals mined ethically, traceable from extraction to export. It wasn't just currency, it was sovereignty on a ledger. IMF forecasts collapsed overnight. Wall Street freaked. Brussels held emergency talks. Washington froze all aid. France threatened military blockade, but the genie was out. Then came the ghost. On a rainy night in Ouagadougou, just days after the accord, Traoré received a message. He's alive. Zahra looked up. Who? Kofi Mensah? Traoré said grimly. He's been captured in Sierra Leone. They're planning to extradite him to France. Kofi had vanished months ago, the Ghanaian activist who'd first warned them about the Monroe Directive. Now he was in chains. Traoré stood up. We're bringing him home. Zahra protested. It's a trap. You know it is. I know. Traoré replied. That's why I'm going alone. He flew under the radar. No escorts. Just a private jet borrowed from a sympathetic Angolan businessman and a forged passport. In Freetown, Sierra Leone, the streets were under heavy military lockdown. The government was terrified. Western embassies were watching every port. Traoré moved like a ghost. He found Kofi locked in a coastal military prison, broken but not silenced. The guards didn't recognize Traoré. That was part of the plan. He posed as a Red Cross delegate. Paid the right bribes, slipped into the cell block at midnight. Their reunion was silent. Kofi could barely speak. We don't have much time. Traoré said, can you walk? I can fly. Kofi whispered, but as they reached the exit, the alarm rang. Gunfire erupted. Traoré shielded Kofi as bullets shattered the hallway windows. He returned fire with military precision, former paratrooper instincts kicking in, but they were outnumbered, cornered. And then the twist, a burst of Arabic over a hidden comm link. Then from the alley a convoy of desert bikes roared in. Ayoub al-Zairi had sent his riders, masked and ruthless. The shadows of the Sahel crashed through the compound, extracting both men under cover of smoke grenades. Within minutes, they were gone. By sunrise, the president of Sierra Leone was on national television, claiming he'd released Kofi Mensah in the spirit of reconciliation. The lie didn't matter. The world had seen the rescue. The legend had grown. Back in Burkina Faso, Kofi spoke at the Pan-African Congress. His voice was hoarse, but his message clear. They chained me because I told the truth, but truth doesn't die, it spreads. Like fire, like gold, like dust rising in a mine that belongs to its people. Tears filled eyes across the crowd, and then Traoré stepped forward, placing a single coin, the first physical AfriCoin ever minted, into Kofi's hand. Now, he said, the world knows we're not poor. The retaliation was immediate. A cyber attack struck the national grid. Refineries exploded in Niger. A terrorist bombing ripped through a marketplace in Bobo Dioulasso with intelligence pointing toward a French black ops unit paying jihadist proxies. That was the line. Traoré summoned every allied leader for an emergency broadcast. He stared directly into the camera. This is your last warning. Africa is not your playground. Our soil, our sweat, and our struggle, they are not for sale. Then, without breaking eye contact, he signed an executive order. All foreign military presence on Burkina soil was now illegal. All mining contracts signed prior to 2022 were nullified. The world gasped, and then it happened. Inside a private Zurich vault, an anonymous whistleblower dumped a file labeled Cobalt Protocol to WikiLeaks. It detailed over 120 illegal mineral extraction routes out of Africa, bankrolled by French, Canadian, Chinese, and American conglomerates. The backlash was volcanic. Protests erupted in London, Paris, and New York, not just by Africans, but by students, environmentalists, human rights groups. Corporations saw their stocks plummet. CEO resigned, an entire global order exposed by a man in a military jacket mining dust in the Sahel. And then, as quietly as he rose, Ibrahim Traoré vanished. No press conference, no farewell. Zara found a handwritten note on her desk. The revolution must be bigger than any man. I am not the story, the people are. Lead them. He was never seen again. Some say he went to a monastery in Ethiopia. Others claim he joined Ayub's caravan and now roams the desert. One theory, whispered only at night, is that he walks the mines still deep underground, a ghost among minerals watching. Zara became interim president. The AfriCoin network expanded. Trade between African nations rose 400%. The Tambao mine, once looted by foreigners, became a university for miners, coders, engineers. And at the entrance of the mine, etched in stone, a single phrase remained, asterisk asterisk. They said Africa was poor. Then we mined $28 million in 2 days, and we're just getting started. Asterisk asterisk.